Hi everybody, welcome to class. My name is Professor Zenobia Bennefield. I am teaching online. Welcome to my YouTube classroom. Today we are talking about neurodiversity, gender, and sexuality. And as I was preparing for this lecture, I was really excited about the information, mostly because it made me ask a lot of questions. And so I'm hopeful that I'm going to get your creative juices flowing and you'll start asking yourself these questions and hopefully finding out the answers so that you can better serve the kids in your community. So did you know this? Because I did not know this. And I'm going to read it to you because I want to make sure that I say this correctly. Neurodiverse people, especially those on the autism spectrum, are more likely to be gender diverse than neurotypical people. Okay, I'm going to say that again. Neurodiverse people, particularly those on the autism spectrum, are more likely to be gender diverse than neurotypical people. I did not know that. Did you know that? I didn't know that. And so as a researcher, my first question is, well, why? Why? And I came across this blog, and I'm going to pull up the blog. I'm going to give you the information so that you can read this because it's really, really fascinating. It's a blog from the Asperger and Autism Network, from their National LGBTQ Task Force blog. This comes from 2016. It was written by Lydia XZ Brown. So thank you, Lydia, for your work. Lydia introduces themselves as saying, I am an autistic activist, deeply invested in queer politics, and I've managed to fumble my way around without ever developing a conventional understanding of gender. So Lydia identifies noun as genderqueer or non-binary. And when Lydia in this blog confronts the same question that I just confronted, why would people with autism be more likely to be genderqueer than neurotypical people? Lydia writes, okay. Being autistic doesn't cause my gender identity, but it is inextricably related to how I understand and experience gender. Autistic people's brains are fundamentally different from those of anyone who is assumed to be normal or healthy. For many, but certainly not all, autistic people, we can't make heads or tails of either the widespread assumption that everyone fits neatly into categories of men and women, or the nonsensical characteristics expected or assumed of womanhood and manhood. When I read that, I was gobsmacked because it made so much sense to me, right? What Lydia is saying is, I'm an autistic person, right? So I'm speaking as Lydia, paraphrasing what they wrote. And my brain, the way it functions in general, my brain doesn't compute things into these categories and these boxes and in this way in which there's this label and then there are these characteristics that we perform. Like, my brain just doesn't even work in that way. So of course, if my brain doesn't work in that way, it wouldn't work in that way with gender either. So that makes completely sense to Lydia why there is this connection between, or this overlap between the autism spectrum and the gender spectrum. And that just really resonated with me. But what's really interesting too, right? Not only is there this connection, but that unfortunately, because of that social construction of what it means to be autistic, right? And we talked about this earlier in our defining lecture about being incapable of marriage, incapable of love, of intimate relationships, of holding down a job, or of even knowing thyself, right? There's this assumption that because this person is autistic, they couldn't really know their own thoughts. Or what's really common with gender and sexuality is that autistic people are often told this is just a phase. They're not taken seriously. And so as I was reading that, it made me think, whoa, okay, so what does this mean for the classroom? What does this mean for us as educators as we try to create very safe spaces? And I thought, if I had a student experiencing not only the overlap of being autistic or having autism and identifying as genderqueer, right, in a heteronormative, neurotypical society, but then if they are not believed or supported by their families in the classroom, they are bringing their stress, their anxiety, their lack of familial support, and perhaps even their social isolation. And depending on the environment that I create, I'm either going to exasperate that and re-traumatize, or I can create an environment that at least does no more harm. And that's what I tell a lot of my teachers, because they'll come to me with students with maybe not this particular set of characteristics, but a completely different set of characteristics, but that's also connected to its own trauma. And they'll say to me, Zenobia, what do? I want to fix X, Y, or Z. And I say to them, I get why you want to jump in, but quite frankly, you don't have the tools, the skill set, the knowledge, the ability, or the support to do it all. So if you can't have a overwhelmingly positive impact, or have a positive impact, period, the least you can do is do no harm. Create an environment that is at least safe. And I am always a proponent, no matter what your politics are. And this is a conversation that I have with teachers who will sometimes pull me to the side after I do conversations like this or lectures like this, and they'll say, what, you know, like my faith or my beliefs sometimes stop me from believing in X, Y, and Z. And I say, and you know, that's fine. I don't, as a teacher, come in and tell people what to believe or to dismantle their faith. But I'm sure your faith makes space for creating a safe space and valuing the humanity of children. And I heard it said in practice, I was talking to a kindergarten teacher, and the kindergarten teacher was like, look, Zenobia, I have no desire to teach gender identity or sexuality to my kindergartners. But if Susie has two mommies, I want Susie to know that it is perfectly fine that she has two mommies, that families come in different shapes and sizes, and we love her just the same, and let's get back to learning how to write. And I thought, and there it is, right? There it is in perfect practice. So in terms of us as educators, sometimes it is better for us to stay away from certain topics if we don't have the training, the support, or the resources. In those cases, my suggestion always is to do no harm by validating our students' humanity and creating environments that don't do any more harm, that don't add to the trauma. And that can happen in various ways, right? The same way my kindergarten teacher said to me, I tell Susie, look, we don't care about those two mommies the same way we don't care about Jacob's mommy and daddy. We're all people. We all deserve to be here. We all are treated equally. Let's get back to work. And sometimes being seen, but allowing your identity to not become then the focal point is enough. It is enough, right? And then to see that all people in the class are treated exactly the same, no matter what their identities are, that is enough. So that causes us as educators to make sure that we have rules that address equity, and that when we apply those rules, right, when we start to act out those rules, that we act them out in equitable ways. Most of us do. I find that most teachers absolutely, you know, they don't care where their kids come from. I know, I can tell you, I don't care about any of that. You know, let's get the work done. I want you to feel safe enough here to be able to get the work done. But sometimes it's important for us, particularly if we may be in a conservative space or a liberal space, you know, if we're in a space where whatever our students' identity is may sort of rub against society's grain, or the community society's grain, or the sort of values of this regional area, right? It's our responsibility to at least create a safe enough space in the classroom. And why do we do this, right? Why do we do this? And it's not just because teachers are saints, and in my opinion, most teachers are. Now, don't get me wrong, there's some bad teachers out there who should not be in the classroom. But I would argue for the teachers that I've met, most of us, we just love our kids and we love education and we want to see them thrive. And so why do we work on creating these safe spaces? Why do we work on ensuring that our students, particularly if they sit at the intersection of autistic and genderqueer, why do we work so hard to create equitable environments? because what you do matters. So I worked with the NCSA, so the National Comorbidity Survey Adolescent Data. It's a very large national data set on psychiatric information for children. And one of the things that really shocked me from that data was how important students' relationship to their teachers and to their classroom environments were. In that, if a student had a positive relationship with their teacher, if the student felt like they liked their teacher and their teacher liked them, if they believed that the teacher was fair, they didn't have to always agree with the teacher, but if the teacher was fair, then those characteristics predicted good health outcomes and strong academic outcomes. Creating an equitable environment for students makes them perform better. They do better. They learn better. They're less likely to engage in risk behaviors. They're more likely to choose positive coping mechanisms, and they're more likely to have academic outcomes. And this is not just for the children who may be specifically targeted. So let's use this example. If I make sure I create an equitable environment and the student who is autistic and genderqueer really benefits from these rules, but the other students, simply by seeing equity in practice, also reap the benefits, right? And so it becomes important because, I mean, it's good for us. It makes it easier for us to do our jobs. They come to school prepared to learn, knowing that they're safe and ready to receive an education from us. So, this lecture, I hope as I, circle back and wrap everything up, understanding that I don't really like the term vulnerable, right? I don't like to call people vulnerable, but I do think it's important to highlight that certain identities experience more, maybe more predators, more vulnerabilities in our society. And people who are neurodivergent and genderqueer may experience a heightened level of discrimination and exclusion. And that erosion of the human spirit, to feel unseen, and then when you are seen, to be discriminated against, can be an enormous weight for a child to bear. And as educators, we sometimes see the loved ones in their lives, their parents and their pediatricians, sometimes sort of throwing fuel on the fire of not seeing them because the parents are just so afraid and just trying to do their best. And so when we cannot intervene, and sometimes we just can't, sometimes we just have to watch. What we can do is control the little microcosm that we are control over, our classrooms, and create environments where children can thrive. Creating rules and curriculum and policy that see humanity of ourselves and our kids, and that center equity. And in so doing, the immediate product is the protection of those students with those quote unquote multiple vulnerabilities, but it also creates an environment where all students learn the value of equity through experience, right? Kids don't do what we say, they do what we do, right? So they're going to witness the practice of equity simply through osmosis because it's the structure of the classroom. And then they're all going to thrive because the research indicates that these types of environments increase students' self-esteem, self-compassion, compassion for others, their academic performance, and their behaviors. So this is a win-win-win-win-win. Thank you so much for coming to class. Thank you so much for learning with me and for trying to process this information. I hope that it helps you, and I really hope that it helps the kids that you serve.